In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, it's Nico, Brian, Mike, and Dustin, and they are all that stand between you and the films that could end the world. Welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast. Just want to thank all our fans and listeners. We really appreciate y'all. We can't stress that enough. Y'all make this show super special. Before we get into tonight's film, we just want to give a quick shout out to our website, don'tgooutthere.com. I can't compliment my man Brian enough. He's done a great job on the website. It looks fantastic. We have all of our episodes and interviews there if you want to listen weekly. From episode 1 to the weekly release, all episodes are there. We have all of our interviews from the past on there as well in our interviews tab. It's a lot easier to find them there instead of scrolling through almost 300 episodes now of Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So definitely check our interviews there. And we might have just dropped a really cool interview with a Scream member, a former friend of the show. So check it out. Just want to give a shout out to our store for sure. We have some new t-shirts, hoodies. I know it's not cold anymore, but hell, rock the hoodie inside when you got that AC blasting. It'll look great.
At the gym, whatever.
At the gym, burning them calories off.
That's right.
Hell yeah, brother. We also have Shan's Etsy page attached as well. If you want to grab a tumbler, a Don't Go Out There tumbler, rep us. We would love to see your post of you having our merch. And I want to shout out all of our social media links, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We love interacting with our fans. We love meeting you, chit-chatting with you, reading your comments and questions every episode. So definitely check us out on social media. And the last thing I want to shout out before we get into the film review is our Patreon. We call it Blood Donors. We have the traditional weekly, monthly reoccurring kind. None of that money goes into our pockets. It just goes directly back into the podcast. You know, it's not free hosting our files, our website, making YouTube videos, stuff like that. That's all that money goes to. Or you're a big fan of a movie and you're like, hey, I would love to hear Don't Go Out There review that movie. That option is available as well. We'll be doing another Blood Donor review in a couple weeks. So definitely check out our website if you're interested in donating and becoming a blood donor. Tonight is my film review in Horror Classic Month. I really didn't know what to choose because I have no nostalgia. I haven't seen any of these movies. But, you know, a few months back, Dustin was teasing about picking Vampire Month. So I was thinking about why not do Dracula. It's a classic. He's a vampire, so why not? Then he changed it to Horror Classic, so I just locked it in as Dracula. He's one of the most iconic figures in horror and just pop culture in general. So I chose Dracula. I have no real reason. And I thought the movie was just okay. I thought it was slightly better than Frankenstein. I felt like the story stayed more true to what I know about Dracula, if that makes any sense at all. It didn't keep going back to this damn party over and over like in Frankenstein and stuff like that. So I thought the movie was okay, but it's nothing I would ever really want to rewatch again, if that makes sense. All right, Brian, what do you think about Dracula?
I think I said it during Frankenstein, or maybe I just said it to Nico when we were first talking about it. I don't know. But I said the first time I saw this movie, I found it rather boring. But that was 20 plus years ago. I will say now I totally renege on that statement. And while I think the second half does drag a little, this was very enjoyable. And I found it, even more enjoyable than my pick, Frankenstein, a few weeks ago. I mean, come on. I mean, it doesn't get any more classic than the film that is widely credited as the kickstarting the horror genre in Hollywood. While I will say the same thing I did about Frankenstein, though, I think Dwight Frye steals the show again. All right, Lugosi's performance. I mean, how do I say this? It's not the depiction of Dracula that I'd want now, but I wouldn't want this movie to be any other way. Does that make sense? The man playing Dracula on Broadway when he came in here, so he plays it exactly as I would expect a play on Broadway to go, which, this movie reminds me of more than a film. And, that's easy for me to separate in my own mind. That made more sense in my head, but whatever. Hopefully you know what I'm trying to say. Regardless, I found myself really enjoying this and the change of locations that I did not remember happening in the movie. I really enjoyed the change of locations that we didn't get from the other two movies we've done this month. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've seen this movie one other time, a very long time ago, actually in a college class, my freshman year of college, and hadn't seen it since, hadn't really thought about looking at it since, but that's why we do the show. I think it's good for that reason. I think this movie's okay. Now, I like it better than Creature from Black Lagoon. I mean, it's significantly better. I still think Frankenstein holds up better over time if we're just comparing those two Universal monster movies. Um, it's fine. Like, I think it's really, really good in spots. I think there's great acting performances that are very strong that kind of carry the movie, and some of the parts I think are a little bit drug out. Like, for a movie that's only an hour and 14 minutes, it kind of feels a little bit longer towards the end. Now, like Brian said, it's really only in the second half that feels that way. The first half kind of flows nice. It's very succinct, and it goes along. And I like I like the quiet sometimes, and then sometimes I hate the quiet. Like the no soundtrack. I tried to find the soundtrack version that got added later on, years and years and years later, but I didn't want to pay for it, to be honest. So I ended up watching the very old version, and I think it's fine. I think this is a movie where how a lot of people feel about Psycho, where maybe they want to like it more than they actually do. Not me, because I love Psycho, but a lot of people have that feeling of they appreciate Psycho and they appreciate Texas Chainsaw Massacre more than they actually like the film. I think that's where I land on this movie, where I can really appreciate what it did for the genre and the roots that it laid down for the next 100 years going forward. But I don't love the film. Like, I think it's a little boring in parts. Obviously, there's just stuff they can't help because of how many years removed we are from the film that I just don't think hold up. But there's a little bit of a charm to it in this one as opposed to Creature of the Black Lagoon. But I think it's fine. It's a really good old style horror movie, but there's just a few things that I can't get to where I love it like I do Frankenstein.
I think it's damn good. I think it's the best of the movies that we've done this month so far, and I don't think it's particularly close. I get what you're saying about the you like it in some parts, you don't like it in some parts, other parts that it doesn't have a score. But to me, I like it a lot. And at that time when they made the movie, they didn't do scores to movies because if there wasn't movie or music being happening on the screen, then they didn't want to try to explain why the audience was hearing music, because you got to think the talkies were still pretty new at this point too. But I thought that this was my first time watching it, like actually watching. I've seen clips from it, of course. Who hasn't? I've heard quotes from it, of course. Who hasn't? But this was my first time actually watching all 75 minutes of it, or however long it is, however short it is. And I thought it was really good. I thought there was some really good stuff as far as cinematography and just the way that certain scenes were shot. I thought was great. I like the creepiness and the mystery of Dracula, Count Dracula himself. I actually really liked it. So I think it held up pretty good. If you just, you have to remember, movies aren't made like this anymore.
Right.
Like things have come so far as even how actors act. And so once you just look at it for what it is and remember, okay, 1931, I think it's really damn good.
All right, guys, any more opening thoughts before we just jump into it? All right. The film starts with title card and opening credits to a smooth tune. We see a horse and buggy going through rocky terrain as a man asks the driver to slow down, but another man says, "We must make it to the end before nightfall," bringing up Nosferatu. Some town folks see the buggy come through the gates and greet them accordingly. Renfield says to leave his luggage on top of the buggy. He's meeting Count Dracula at Borgo Pass at midnight. He's told they are all vampires at the castle. Dracula and his wives feed on blood. Renfield says he's not afraid and it's business. A woman gives him a cross to wear on his neck to protect him. The others cry and pray as the carriage leaves. We see the castle now and go inside as we see coffins open. We zoom in on Dracula as his wives awake and walk towards him. Dracula is acting as coach of the next horse and buggy. Renfield hands him his luggage and gets in the buggy. They stop at the castle and Dracula is gone. Renfield walks inside the castle and wanders as we see Dracula walk down the stairs towards him. He introduces himself and Renfield says he's not sure what happened to the driver, his luggage, and he thought he was lost. Dracula calls wolves children of the night as they howl. Dracula says blood is life as Renfield cuts through a spider web and walks through it. We're in the nice part of the castle now and Dracula offers him dinner. He tells Renfield he took the liberty to have his luggage brought up. He asks him if he kept his coming up here a secret. He says he has and hands him the lease paperwork. He says he's taking only 3 boxes and has gotten a ship to England for tomorrow. He shows Renfield his bed and shies away when he sees the cross. He pours Renfield some wine. He takes a drink and Dracula smiles, saying he'll leave him now. Good night, Mr. Renfield. Renfield seems sketched out and opens a door, but then passes out. The wives walk in, as does Dracula. He forces them away and leans over him. Aboard the Vesta, bound for England, we see the waves crashing on deck as Renfield awakes Dracula once the sun is gone. He asks if he will keep his promises once they get to London. He needs blood. We see the boat docked and the captain and his crew are dead. Renfield tells them, "We're here, we're safe." They open the hatchway when they hear Renfield's deranged laugh. We see newspaper clippings and that Renfield is being kept at a lab to study. London. A woman is selling violets as Dracula walks up, giving her the stare. He leans in and she screams. Dracula continues walking the streets. He goes into a symphony and is taken to the balcony. The server tells Dr. Seward he's wanted on the phone. Seward introduces him to the others he's sitting with. Dracula wants to acquire the abbey. It reminds him of his castle in Transylvania. He says there are far worse things awaiting man than death. The lights dim and we zoom in on his eyes again. All right, Brian, that's the opening set of scenes I got. What did you think?
Okay, I got a lot here, but this is the most I have today. So, fun fact right off the bat here, the first lines of the movie when that book is being read is actually Carla Laemmle, niece of studio founder Carl Laemmle. That opening score you guys were talking about a little bit, I was a fan of, but like I said with the others we've done this month, and you guys obviously were touching on this some, I found myself actually missing that musical score in these. And to use the same word that I used last week, it's just kind of bizarre without music to me. Mike brought up the other versions with a score. That was done by Philip Glass in 1998. And I've actually never seen a version with the score. I 100% think that I will not only check that out now, but that I will actually like that one better, actually. I've always credited Crazy Ralph in Friday with being the first trope of that old man harbinger of doom. But this is most definitely it with the dude that looks like Super Mario here. And before I get to Dracula, I did want to say a few things. A negative to me is the cinematography. Like, there are very few shots with camera movement. And we've seen time and time again on stuff we've reviewed where even if a scene is boring, camera movement and different cuts can make it interesting. And that's few and far between here for me, which almost certainly stems from the director Todd Browning being a very well-known silent filmmaker of the time. But to me, that would prompt you to try to make the scenes more interesting. But hey, what do I know? On a positive note, though, there is absolutely amazing production design in this movie. I think that's what makes me like it, more than some of the others that we've done this month, is that there's very noticeably so many changes in sets. And I think that helps with the lack of score to keep me personally engaged more anyway. But the castle, I think, looks fantastic. The lighting is wonderful, especially for the small amount of time that we actually spend there. I'll also give credit to cinematographer Carl Freund, who will coincidentally be handed the directing duties of The Mummy the following year. But Lugosi's Dracula. Look, they obviously drew a lot of Nosferatu and not necessarily Bram Stoker's book, which is whatever. It's hard for me to judge because Universal made this character like they did the others their own. And this was the Dracula that, like Nico said, I always thought of when I think of him. I'd say for a more faithful adaptation, check out the Man, Keanu Reeves, in that 92 version. I do feel like Nico is going to hate that one, though, whenever we do review it eventually, and Interview with the Vampire when we finally get to those. I'm just throw that out there. I want to go on record with that. Peek behind the curtain, the scene by scene, Nico ended our notes by saying zoom in through Dracula's eyes. And at first I got confused because there's like 4 or 5 of those in this set of scenes. But I like the nice touch of Lugosi not blinking at all in those zoom shots that show his eyes. Like, it's funny because if literally there was anyone like this, people would not hang around the guy. Like, you definitely have to suspend belief, not of like a vampire being real, but a dude acting like a weirdo like he does. To me, though, don't show this first part with him getting out of the coffin as far as Dracula goes. Have the first time we see him, the first time Renfield does, like on the staircase. That's just my opinion. And last thing I want to do is give credit to our guy, Dwight Frye, Fry. I don't know what I was talking about there. Dwight Fry from Frankenstein. I think his performance as Renfield is so damn good. Like, it apparently led to him being typecast as a lunatic, which I can see why. And was I the only one who laughed the first time he lets Dracula, like when he's letting him loose on the ship and he asks if he will keep his promise and some shit about some small bug lives? Every time it shows Dracula, it looks like he's thinking, what the fuck is he talking about? I laughed out loud there. That's all. I'll shut up.
Man, see, I'm almost the opposite of you every week. I like these old ass openings. Like I can't really explain why. Very just put you in a time capsule, because I think for me anyway, and I may be alone, in order to watch these movies, I got to get in the right frame of mind. Like I got to almost go back in time and put myself somewhere different. I can't view it through the modern lens because movies have changed so much. Film has changed so much. So it's like, oh yeah, this movie was made a really long fucking time ago. And man, these sets, which you mentioned, the background, you get like the painted mountains here. Like, yeah, you can tell now, but you probably couldn't back then. And I think that's really cool. But for whatever reason, there's just like a little bit of charm to that. Like, I can't quite put my finger on why I actually like that. When it's something like last week where it was very obvious, I didn't like it. So, hey, when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. But when they're in this wagon and it's rocking back and forth, like, that's just some old ass filmmaking that I find really funny and really cool. So anyway, you get into the town, and I like the way that they're kind of hyping up Count Dracula. Like, I like don't go there, they're vampires. And again, you got to remember, at this time, the film moviegoer didn't know that much about like Dracula and vampires. Like, it wasn't as part of our pop culture lexicon as it is now. Yeah, it was on Broadway, but it wasn't quite very pop. And I know that Bram Stoker had written Dracula, but hadn't exploded in this way before the movie comes out. So, I mean, they're kind of setting good groundwork here, and I like it. You get Renfield, who I like. I don't like him as much as you do. I think his character kind of goes off the rails a little bit, but I mean, it's well acted, no doubt. I praise the man's performance in Frankenstein, so I'm gonna give him some credit here. I'm with you, Brian. The first time we should have seen Dracula was when Renfield did. Absolutely 100%. On those stairs, seeing him for the first time, and Lugosi is fantastic. What can I say that hasn't already been said about his performance? Because like you guys, when I think of Dracula, this is what I think of. And I've only seen the movie one other time than this. And I can still, that's the image. That even the voice, which, again, originally this was not supposed to have this voice, but Lugosi's Hungarian, and this voice, this Transylvanian voice that he puts together, I think works so well for the character. And the reason it does is because when people talk like a vampire, or like when they talk like Dracula all these years later, they still use that voice. Like, this look with the suit and the teeth still are on, Halloween candy things every year. Like, it's just, this is what Dracula is. And I think going back and reviewing it is really, really cool. I don't have a whole lot on like what happens in the movie. I will say some of the scenes on the ship look, they don't age well. I know it's from another movie, so that's fine. But outside of that, it has me interested at this point. Like, I'm still captivated because it's still, to me at this point, it's not dragging yet. It's just, we've done a really good job of focusing on what is creepy. Brian mentioned the cinematography, so did Dustin. Just really quick, I think there's a good mixed bag here. Like, when they zoom in on his eyes and they do like the spooky stuff, like, I think that adds a little something, but it's not perfect throughout for sure.
So, yeah, I also, Brian, this is the most notes that I have is on this opening set of scenes. So don't apologize for that, brother. But first of all, it's a very to-the-point opening. Like, once we get past the opening credits there, it's like, boom, we establish a superstition about Walpurgis Night, like, immediately, and they show us that there's a certain stigma surrounding Count Dracula and this mystery surrounding the Count and the castle. Like, all that happens within the first 4 minutes of the movie. We get an immediate shot of Dracula's wives rising from the coffin, and the look of Dracula himself, I think, is just very eerie stuff. Like, I like how we are introduced to Dracula and his wives or his ladies rising from the caskets. I thought that was cool. I do think when you watch this movie, it's kind of funny seeing the bats themselves. Because like today's movies, you'd either have real bats or you'd have some really good CG bats. And these just appear to be like cardboard bats dangling on some strings. So I thought it's kind of fun. That's the worst part of the movie, honestly, to me, is how the damn bats look. And if that's the worst part, then that's pretty forgivable. And then homeboy means to tell me that he doesn't know what happened to the driver with all his luggage while he's clearly talking to the driver. Like that was clearly Count Dracula himself. And he got a great look at him. His face was all illuminated. He had those fucking, I've been tweaking on meth for 3 days eyes. Like what? And you're telling me you don't recognize that man when you're standing in front of him in his castle? It makes no sense, but okay. Like, in other adaptations of this, the driver's identity was really concealed. And so it makes sense that he wouldn't recognize him. But here they just like, fuck it. And then this set of scenes in particular is where I feel that the lack of score just makes it all the more creepy. Like when he's showing Renfield around his castle and talking to him there, and it's just the deafening silence or the, grainy cackling of the poor sound quality that's not really translated well over the years. But that just made it so much more creepy to me. And then when Renfield gets the paper cut, the way the camera zooms in on Dracula and you see his eyes like light up, I thought that was a perfect shot of Dracula right there. I know they show close-ups of his eyes more, but this one I felt like it had more of a draw, like it drew you in more, it zoomed in more, and I thought that it was an absolutely perfect shot. But then, okay, Renfield's, he's done with dinner here. Did he faint because he saw the bat? Or did he get so tipsy off the wine that he just drunk and fell on his ass? I thought that was.
See, I thought that was blood, and like he was drinking Dracula's blood, and that's what made him pass out. That was just my kind of. I wasn't sure. It's definitely not defined, but that's what I thought is maybe he gave him blood and not wine, and then that's how he kind of turns him into a vamp. Maybe I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, I know that it's like Hungarian tradition that they're really big on wine. But I also feel like if it was blood, even if it was Dracula's blood, like he wouldn't have been like, I don't drink the wine. Like he just straight up turned it down. I don't know, but regardless, like the way he just passed out like that, and then we get someone else, is it the maid that passes out later? We'll get to it. I've got it in my notes, but the other passing out that we get later in the movie, it's like, that's not really, is that Dracula as the bat is like casting some kind of spell and causes them to pass out, or they faint because they're scared of bats? Like I believe that. But anyway, after the ship was found and Renfield was discovered, like it was very odd to me watching it back how they showed us the newspaper clippings that explained that they found the ship and there was a lunatic on board. Like the reason it was so strange, this is like the only part in the movie that I really feel like, okay, we need a score. Because in today's movies, if they're wanting us to read something like that, we would have music accompanying it. We didn't get that here, and it was just kind of weird, but that's okay. It's definitely forgivable. And the last thing I put was, what a damn quote we get here. When Dracula's, talking to the girls up on the balcony there at the play or at the theater, and he says, to die, to be truly dead, that must be glorious. It's like, holy shit, I thought that was such a cool quote. But, and then, because he's like, there's much more terrible things than being, than death. But, overall, I thought it was a very solid open. I mean, you almost get introduced to everything so quickly that you forget how we're introduced, and it just feels like, okay, we're thrown in, but I get what's going on. And I can appreciate it.
All right, Mina and Lucy are in their room, and Mina does her Dracula impression. Lucy says he seems fascinating. Mina leaves her saying goodnight. Lucy looks out the window as Dracula stares up at her room. A bat is flying outside her window as she lies in bed. She falls asleep and Dracula is in her room now. He leans in towards her neck and it cuts to a class watching an operation by Dr. Seward. On the throat of each victim, they have the same 2 marks, he says. Martin takes Renfield's spiders and throws them out the window. Martin calls him a loony for eating bugs. Van Helsing runs a test on blood and says we're dealing with the undead, Nosferatu. Van Helsing says Renfield eats living things to sustain his own life. Vampires aren't a myth. I can bring you proof, the scientific reality of today. He asks about Renfield leaving his room and disappearing for hours. Renfield enters the room, and Van Helsing says he's here to help him. Renfield asks to be sent away. He says his cries at night might give Mina bad dreams. We hear a howling again. Martin says Renfield talks to the wolves. He's crazy. Van Helsing puts a cross towards Renfield, and he backs away in fear. Renfield tells the doctor if he's not sent away, he will be liable for what happens to Mina. Van Helsing wants Renfield specially watched, especially at night. Renfield hears a howl and goes to his window and sees Dracula. He begs him not to make him do that. He begins to weep, saying, "No, please don't." Dracula leans in on Mina's neck as it cuts to Mina telling John Harker her nightmare. He tells her, "We're going to get rid of these dreams. Think of something cheerful." Van Helsing asks her about the dream. He looks at her neck and sees the bite marks. He asks when she got those. Dracula walks in telling her she looked exceptional. Dr. Seward introduces Dracula and Van Helsing. Dracula is familiar with them. Mina tells Dracula she had a bad dream. Van Helsing notices he has no reflection in the mirror. Mina says good night and leaves the room with Dracula as he asks if he can call later. Van Helsing shows Dracula the mirror and he swats it away. Dracula apologizes to Dr. Seward saying he doesn't like mirrors. He walks away telling Van Helsing he's a wise man for not even living one life. John asks, "What's that running across the yard? It looks like a wolf." Van Helsing says he's our vampire. John thinks Van Helsing's message is all crazy talk. Mina walks outside to Dracula and kisses him. Helsing explains to John what a vampire is and how it survives. Renfield laughs and enters the room. He tells Dr. Seward to follow what Helsing says. It's their only hope, her only hope. Renfield apologizes to his master, and Helsing asks what's his relationship with Dracula. We hear a scream as a maid runs up saying Mina is dead. Renfield begins to laugh maniacally as she falls over. He crawls to her body and grabs her neck. They find Mina, who is still alive, as Dracula reveals himself from behind a tree. The next set of scenes are the ending. What'd you think, Brian?
Okay, so Lucy getting bit here in the bedroom, well, I mean, the assumed biting, I actually didn't remember that we never see Dracula bite anyone at all. But most of all, my guy doesn't even have fangs, which I didn't know either. My biggest thing about these four new characters, though, like they just don't seem, I don't know, as fleshed out, pun intended, as I would have probably liked to have seen. Renfield took over Harker's role in the book for the most part, as far as the real estate angle goes. So there's really nothing else for this dude to even do besides be a damn cuck, because his girl's fighting over Dracula right in front of him the rest of the whole entire movie. David Manners would actually go on to play a different role the same year in Universal's The Mummy. Thankfully, he seemingly has a lot more to do, if I remember, in that movie. Good to see Edward Van Sloan again, of course, from Frankenstein as well. Apparently, they had one and cut it, but I would have loved to have seen another warning before the film, like he gave, at the start of Frankenstein. But he's playing the infamous Van Helsing, a little more low-key than Hugh Jackman's version. But question here, is the girl on the operating table, like in that little doctor's thing with all those other doctors, is that Lucy or is that the flower girl from when they first got there? Do you guys know?
I assumed it was Lucy.
Same.
Okay, I don't know. There is actually a goof here in the set of scenes, too, when Van Helsing's trying to catch the Count's lack of reflection in that mirror. There are visible chalk marks on the floor showing Lugosi where to stand for the shot. So, I don't know, just a little funny little tidbit there. But, man, that look when Dracula slaps that mirror out of his hand and stands there like, motherfucker, how dare you? And then it cuts back to Helsing. It's not, but it looks like at first that Sloan is trying not to laugh, and it cracks me up both times I watch this. By the way, what the hell happened to Dracula's sister wives? Like when he said he was going to have no luggage, just some boxes. That's what he said. I assumed it was them, but we don't see them anymore. Maybe that was just the dirt he brought with him. I don't know. That's really all I have. Dwight Fry, though, I think does it amazing yet again in the set of scenes. That laugh, man, the guy was the Joker before the Joker.
Definitely. Yeah, so this set of scenes, I couldn't really come out of it except thinking that Jonathan's a cuck, and you pointed that out pretty early on here. Look, I like the introduction of the character of Lucy. I think it works. And by the way, Brian, I do think that was Lucy. But I like the introduction of these new characters because I almost forgot that Dracula had wives for a little bit. So that's something that just slipped my mind. But this like spell he's able to put people under, like I do find it interesting that this version of Dracula has all these different powers. Shapeshifts into a bat, shapeshifts into a wolf. He's able to put people under a spell. Like, it's interesting. It's definitely a writing tool though to kind of get wherever you want to go. He could do pretty much whatever he wants because he's the count. So I like that, but I really love this set of scenes. To me, is good for the interaction between Van Helsing and Dracula. Like the acting performances of Sloane and Lugosi are fucking fantastic to me. Especially the mirror scene. Like that's a classic scene, and they have it in other Dracula movies, but it doesn't quite hit the same as it does in this one, and I love it. But you're right to point that out, and it's not something I would have ever thought of until we go back and do a movie like this. Not only does he not have fangs, we never actually see him bite anyone. And I think, obviously, back in 1931, that would have been very controversial to bite someone, I'm guessing. So maybe that's why. But no, I think the acting is what carries this set of scenes to me. And I do love where the story is going. It's towards the end that I think the movie drags. But this part, I'm really invested in what Van Helsing is doing. I think adding Edward Van Sloan was a big plus. But that's pretty much all I have. Like, I think this is a good set of scenes. And it still has me here. And then towards the end, it just starts to get a little long in the tooth. No pun intended.
Okay. So, first of all, yes, Brian, I do think that the boxes that he took was just the earth or just his dirt so that he could, sleep in them. Because I read that, I think in the novel, he takes like hundreds of boxes of dirt with him. And in this, he only takes 3. And then also I read that, you talked about how this one kind of makes, or one of you guys said how this one makes Dracula its own character instead of borrowing strictly from the book. Well, the original plan was to do strictly off the book, and they wanted to do a huge production, but this was like right on the heels of the Depression, and the studio was kind of afraid to invest that much money in the project. So, okay, we can forgive them for that. But I think we get a great shot. Now, I know what I said about the bats and how they look, but it is a great shot of the bat outside her window here. And then I love how the camera pans to her, to the bat, to her, to the bat, back to her, and then boom, Dracula's in the room. Like, that's a great way to show the audience what's happening without having to rely on any special effects because they didn't have special effects. Like, that's a great way to imply that the bat is in fact Dracula. And then I did think it was just absolutely perfect delivery when Mina is talking to her man and Dr. Van Helsing there. And they're like, what could have caused them, Mina? And then you hear Count Dracula as Count Dracula walks into the room.
Yes.
It's like, because the first time you see it, it's like, holy shit, is this just some random person putting the pieces of the puzzle together and just telling us, hey, it's Count Dracula, you dumbasses? No, it's just literally, he's here to see you. That was great. And then, I don't have many notes on this. This is the last thing I have. It's absolutely perfect cinematography. 10 out of 10 shot when Van Helsing looks in the mirror and discovers that Dracula's not there. Like, that was just absolutely perfect because you didn't need special effects. You just shoot it and then tell him to move out of the way because the camera's over here now. Okay, get back in place. Now move again. And just the look on Van Helsing's face, and then that whole back and forth there when he tells him to look in the mirror, and then Dracula's face looks like, oh shit, and he smacks the mirror out of his hand. That was a fantastic scene. So overall, this set of scenes, this middle chunk of the movie, is my favorite set of scenes in the whole movie because I just think it's all so well done. But That's all I got. You can go ahead.
All right, here's the end. Martin reads an article in the newspaper, and a nurse asks if it's ghosts. He says vampires. Helsing asks Mina when she saw Lucy after her burial. Helsing promises after tonight her soul will rest in peace. Mina tells John not to touch or kiss her. She asks Van Helsing to explain, but he walks away. She tells him our love and life is over. Helsing tells Mina to come indoors. John wants Mina to leave with him, and she asks her father to talk to him. Helsing tells a maid Mina is to wear a necklace of wolfbane when she sleeps. We see Dracula awake, and Helsing tells Dr. Seward his thoughts on Dracula. Renfield eavesdrops on Helsing telling John Harker how to kill Dracula. They call Martin, bitching at him for letting Renfield get free. Renfield says Dracula promised him things, millions of rats. Dr. Seward and Martin take Renfield away. Dracula calls for Van Helsing. He tells him his blood flows through Mina's veins. She will live for centuries. Dracula tells Van Helsing to come here and uses his hand to control him. Your will is strong, he tells Van Helsing as he resists his powers. He goes to strike him, but he pulls out a cross. Mina walks up, calling for John, asking what they're doing to her. They send Briggs away. She has John look to the stars, and she goes to bite, but he lowers his head. They sit down, and Helsing tells Seward he mixed his blood with hers. Mina tells John she loves the night. It's the only time I feel alive, as a bat flies up, and John swipes at it. Helsing overhears Mina telling John to get the crucifix from him and hide it. John comments on her eyes and the strange look. Helsing runs up with the cross to stop her from attacking him. Mina tells John what Dracula did to her. He made her drink from a vein in his arm. Mina knocks the wolfbane from her neck as Briggs looks out the window of the door. She removes the wolfbane from over the door. She opens it and lets Dracula in, and he bites her neck. John and Helsing are at the Abbey and see Renfield there. Renfield walks inside and tells Dracula, I'm here, master. He runs up the stairs towards he and Mina. John calls for Mina through a window as Renfield says he didn't lead them here. Renfield begs for his life as Dracula grabs him and kills him as we see his body roll down the stairs. John and Helsing break in as Dracula locks them out of a room. They get through the door as Mina screams. They call out for her, but no answer. Helsing calls for John, saying he's found them. Helsing has John get him a stone to help drive the stakes through their hearts. Mina is gone from her coffin. He opens Dracula's coffin and drives the stake through his heart. As he dies, we see Mina react, and she screams. She hugs John and says she couldn't answer him. Mina and John walk up the stairs as the film ends. Brian, what do you think about the ending?
Well, first off, why did we not see anybody give a shit about Lucy being dead at all? Like, I forgot totally all about her until Mina talks about seeing her as a vampire. I kind of wish we could have, maybe seen a little bit of people giving a shit. She seemed like a core part of the core four here. And the finale was pretty anticlimactic, honestly. And like I said at the very start, a little slow, but still good to me. The confrontation though between Helsing and Dracula in the house parlor room, I don't know where the fuck that's supposed to be at this point, but man, come on, like you got to do better than that. And Harker trying to swat that fake ass bat away and says it'll get in your hair. I don't know. That just cracked me up too. Like that was pretty fucking cheesy. But on a good note, we finally get another good camera movement, in my opinion, as Browning zooms in on Mina's eyes. So I'll give props there as well as the lighting on that terrace. I thought was fantastic. But fucking Martin shooting a damn shotgun just randomly in the yard, like up in the sky towards, the house where they're all standing. But man, that line, they're all crazy except me and you. And sometimes I have my doubts about you. That shit's hilarious. Like I laughed there too, like probably for maybe the first time that intentionally that it was meant to make me laugh. But and seeing Renfield fall down the stairs has to be the only decent kill, right? I mean, it's definitely my favorite kill. But aside from the fact that when he's rolling down the steps, it's pretty obvious by the sound that they're wood set pieces and not stone like they're supposed to and like they appear on screen. But speaking of, Renfield's rat speech to Helsing, I thought was really good yet again. But again, just kind of anticlimactic. Not sure why Dracula, knowing that they were, kind of being hunted, would just go to sleep, especially with it being dark down there in the basement. I don't know. Honestly, I thought it was still nighttime, actually, at that point. I assumed until the very, very end. But, of course, I understand why I was off screen, but it really sucks, pun intended, that Dracula's death was off screen. That's all I have.
Yeah, I thought I was kind of ready to get to the end here. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I was just kind of like, okay, like we've drugged this out a little bit. But look, any time that Edward Van Sloan is on screen, I think it's great. Like, I think the interaction is great. And I know that there's no epic confrontation. It's not, a 1980s boom, bam, loud noise superhero blockbuster. But I like their interaction here at the end. Like, I think them kind of talking almost is something very different, and it's of its time, and I think it kind of worked out okay. This is the only part of the movie where I like Renfield, and not because he dies, but because the acting as he's on the stairs trying to basically beg Dracula not to do it, I think really, really works. And Dracula's Lugosi's facial expressions as he's going to, make Renfield fall down these stairs, I think is great. And I know that the sound of Renfield falling down the stairs, not the sound of him doing it, but the screams that he let out were cut in the original way, and so the version I saw had no noise when so no screams, but like you said, you could hear him falling down the stairs. But that's probably the only good kill in the movie because you actually get to see it. So I really did like that, and I really actually like Dracula's kill. Yeah, like him going to sleep is kind of strange, but I really like driving the stake through the heart. It's a very classic. Now it's a trope to an extent. But again, his screams were cut out of the film in later versions because of a rule, and you couldn't have acts of these violence things and all this stuff. So but I like the kill. Just wish that we could hear it, and it was added back in. But it's not. It wasn't added back into the version that I watched. So, but again, the end drags in the beginning of it, but when we get down here in this basement, whatever you want to call it, it picks back up. I really like both kills, and I think the story wraps up in a nice little bow. So it's not. I'm just kind of. I had the feeling of like, well, that was good. Kind of glad it's over though.
So I love how Mina's begging Van Helsing to explain to John, like, what's going on. Like, please tell him. And then Van Helsing just gets up and walks off, doesn't say a word. Like, that shit was funny to me. She was like, please tell him. And he's just like, no, fuck this, not dealing with it. The confrontation between Dracula and Van Helsing there was great. Like, at the house there, because it was so tense. Like, you got this back and forth there, and Dracula thinks, okay, bitch, I got you. And he's like, oh, your will's pretty strong. And he's got the crucifix. The only part that I didn't like was it was kind of cheesy or corny how he acts when he sees the crucifix, because it's kind of delayed, and it's not like it's really hurting him. He's like, oh, I don't want to look at that. No. Kind of how I look at our group chat sometimes with the shit that you guys send. But, and then it is kind of a, so I do appreciate the fact that Renfield's death is at least semi on screen. So I will agree with you there. But overall, the conclusion was kind of strange to me, because Dracula knew that they were there, right? Renfield's yelling, I didn't lead them here, I promise you. And right. They're yelling through a window that doesn't have any glass, like it's a bar window. So clearly Dracula knows that they're there. He's like, well, that's tomorrow Dracula's problem. I'm going to bed. And so
I'm right.
It's like, I get it. You're running out of darkness, but still, you got to do something, man. This motherfucker's going to stab you in your chest. But it is what it is. And, yeah, it's an okay ending. I don't think they stuck the landing the way that I think they were killing it the rest of the movie. I wasn't happy for it to be over by any stretch of the imagination, but, yeah, it was okay.
That may be my favorite. That may be my favorite thing you've ever said.
Ain't no tomorrow, bitch.
No.
I thought it was fucking stupid too. It's like, bro, what the fuck you getting in the coffin for? Like, they're trying to kill your ass.
Candyman.
Let's jump into our social media comments and questions. Instagram first. We only got one comment from Missy. Lugosi's eyes, creepy. I feel like a lot of people would agree with you on that. Let's jump over to Facebook now. Michelle Mirza commented, good choice, guys. I feel like out of all the classics, this one is the most iconic. Hard to argue with that one as well.
So far, it's the best so far to me.
Have you seen King Kong yet? Your pick next week?
Yeah.
Is it better than King Kong?
So far. Man, listen, I used to watch King Kong a lot with my papa growing up.
I'm just kidding.
It doesn't matter what you think.
I'll go fuck myself. All right, cool.
My bad, dog. I really didn't know if you was going to do a yes or no right there or not.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Why don't you shit and fall in it real quick? What I was going to say is, yes, I've seen King Kong several times. Probably, honestly, more times than I've seen any movie that we reviewed, if I'm being honest. But it's been a while, so I'm not going to say yes or no without revisiting it first.
Fair enough. Why don't you go practice spitting out teeth, and I'll be there in a minute. Kevin Potoff commented, great classic movie. I'm glad you guys are doing this run of movies, even though you shit on them. Now do Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Damn.
Is that a real movie?
Yeah, it
Am
is.
I getting... Holy
That's
shit.
true.
I'm not doing that. I'm not covering that movie. All right, and my mom commented, Bela Lugosi, the original Dracula. She told me a while back to do this movie. Now I'll jump over to Twitter.
Your mom's got better taste than you. Cool.
Mama Chin with the win.
All right, Twitter now. Steven Rodriguez commented, this is actually quite good. Okay.
Yep.
Sean Irwin commented, of all the classics, it probably holds up the best. I've only seen a few of them, and I think so as well.
Agree with Sean.
Other ones I've seen. And the last one we have is from Randy Smith. The classic of all classics. While it's not the first vampire movie, it is by far the most recognizable. Classic vampire movie. Hopefully, y'all are a little nicer to this one than The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I will be nicer to this one than The Creature from the Black Lagoon, I promise.
Same.
That's all I got for social. If y'all want to jump into fun facts.
All right, I got a few. So, Mike, you mentioned the boat scene, how it looked a little herky-jerky. So that scene is actually borrowed from a Universal silent film called The Stormbreaker. And silent films were projected at a different frames per second speed, and so that's why it was so jerky. Makes sense. Bela Lugosi was so eager to repeat his stage success and play the Count Dracula role for this film that he agreed to a contract paying him just $500 per week for a 7 weeks shooting schedule, and which is pretty low even in the days of the Depression, is what it says. But his salary was only a quarter of what David Manners got to play Jonathan Harker. However, Jonathan Harker, or I'm sorry, David Manners, his real name, he likely didn't pocket all his money, though, because he was under contract to Warner Brothers and First National. They had loaned out their contract player at a rate considerably higher, so they probably got most of his money. So it's a little misleading, but still interesting nonetheless. Dracula's castle was a painting on glass in front of the camera. The coach traveling along the road was real, but the background was not. I mean, yeah, we kind of could tell the background wasn't real, but I thought it was cool. It was a painting on glass. Dracula, so Missy mentioned the eyes. Dracula never once blinks his eyes, an effect that enhances the undead character's otherworldly aura, abetted by Bela Lugosi's famous menacing stare. And cinematographer Carl F. He achieved the effect of Dracula's hypnotic stare by aiming 2 pencil spotlights into Bela Lugosi's eyes. God dang, I got a lot this week. A Spanish language version, Dracula, was filmed at night on the same set at the same time that this was being filmed, but with Spanish-speaking actors. I thought that was pretty cool. And the last one is the studio did not want the scene where Dracula attacks Renfield to be filmed at all due to the perceived gay subtext of the situation. A memo was sent to the director stating, quote, Dracula is only to attack women.
I only have one now. The original release featured – no, that's good. I'm glad. The original release featured an epilogue with, like I was kind of talking about earlier, with Edward Van Sloan talking to the audience about what they've just seen. This was removed for the 1936 re-release and is now assumed to be lost. The later Frankenstein similarly copied this model by featuring a prologue. I would have loved to have seen that.
All right. So this movie was made for a whopping $341,191, and it culminated in a $700,000 profit, which in today's money is $13,244,528.30. So there you go. Big ass grossing film right there, Bubba.
Nice. So Brian's pocket change is what you're saying.
That's right.
What in the hell? I'm just minding my own business over here.
He just spent that on a deck of cards anyway.
A deck of cards.
Deck of cards.
All right, let's jump into our favorite kill, least favorite kill, and the rating. Fuck it, I'll just go first, and I don't have no allegiance to it. Favorite kill, I guess Renfield by default. I mean, because it's the only one you kind of see a little bit of anything. Least favorite kill, you can pick any of them, honestly. I'll just go with the captain on the boat because all you see is a shadow bent over and it kind of looked kind of stupid. I'll just roll with that.
Wow.
Rating, obviously, Dracula is iconic. He's been in film for over 100 years now at this damn point. I got to be respectful to that. Do I think the movie holds up great? Do I want to watch it ever really? Not really. But it does have some good scenes to me, like Dustin mentioned with the no reflection in the mirror. I did enjoy that. I will say that I thought there were some good shots, maybe not great cinematography like Brian spoke of, but I thought there were some good shots, and I think they would look really good in color. Like when you see like inside of the castle and all that, I think that would look really good in color in today's age. But you don't really see any kills. I wish we could have, but I'll just give this movie a flat 5. That's just, I mean, I can't say I love it, but I'll give it a 5.
Okay, I have the same favorite kill, least favorite kill, except I didn't really pick one for the other one. It's not perfect, but kind of like I did for the original Friday the 13th. Upon my rewatch, listen to our review, don'tgoothere.com. I have a newfound liking for this movie, and you guys mentioned it. It is mine as well. It's my new favorite Universal horror movie right now. Dustin brought it up, but man, I'm definitely down for another classics month like this. I gave Frankenstein an 8.5. I'm going to give this one a 9. I enjoyed the fuck out of it.
What'd you just say, Brian?
9.
No. The whole another what?
Another horror classics month. Let's go. Part 2.
Why do you hate me? Stop hating hate.
That's tough. Same favorite kill, least favorite kill. Although I will say my least favorite kill is everyone that's not Renfield. To be honest, I actually don't hate the Dracula one, but I mean it's just kind. If it were more on screen, I would be down for it. But anyway, yeah. So like I said, at the top, good movie. I understand why it's a classic. I appreciate it more than I like it. And I think that's kind of where my score wavers just a little bit. I appreciate what it did for horror films, and I appreciate what it did for film in general, honestly. Considering that this movie was made as a silent and a talkie, like that should kind of tell you how long ago this movie was made, and I think it holds up pretty well. Like, there's a few things that don't. You got the bats in there and stuff, but just in general, the story is a tale as old as time, and I really enjoyed the story. Just think a little bit here and there has a hard time holding my attention, and I'm going to chalk that up to just being so far removed from that era of film. I don't think it's the film's fault at all. So all that being said, again, great acting, performances. Wish there was a score. So I'm going to give this movie a 6.5. I thought it was really good. I still think Frankenstein's the best that we've done so far, but I understand why someone would think that it's this one.
Okay. My favorite kill was Renfield as well, because like I said, it's at least semi on camera. My least favorite kill is literally take your pick from the rest, because we didn't even get to see him be attacked. Like, it looked like he was just going in to give him a good night kiss, and next thing you know, they're dead. This movie is iconic, and I think it does hold up really well. I agree with, I think it was Sean that said that. Might have been Steven, I'm not sure. Whoever said that it holds up the best out of the movies, certainly of the ones that we've done so far. And I think after you guys see King Kong's persona on screen next week, you're going to agree this one holds up better as well. Yeah, it's a classic story. It's iconic character. Like you guys mentioned, Mike mentioned, you can still see this get up for this portrayal of Dracula every single Halloween. When people want to do a Dracula impersonation, they do Bela Lugosi's voice. This story is still being portrayed today. I'm going to be going to see Renfield soon, and it looks better than you assholes said that it looks. So I'm looking forward to it. And that's coming from someone who hates Nick Cage. So it's not even like I'm that guy. I just think the movie looks good. Because I really enjoyed Dark Shadows, and it kind of reminds me of Dark Shadows. Anyway, I enjoyed a lot. I would definitely not avoid watching it again. I'm not going to necessarily seek it out, because I'm not going to pay $4 on Amazon just to watch this movie, I don't think, unless I was showing it to someone. So that being said, and the ending took away from me, so it knocked a little bit off the score. I went with an 8.5, and that gives us a composite score of 7.25, and IMDb has it at a 7.4, so we're pretty close, brothers.
Oh, nice. Let's go.
All right, guys. Any final thoughts on Dracula? Probably shout out our blood donors. We'll let Dustin announce his pick for next week that I've already asked him about.
Dracula.
All right. Appreciate all of our blood donors. Y'all help us out a lot. Take a big burden off of us. Camper level reoccurring are Clayton J, Nina, Michelle Mirza, Andrew Ferguson, the Horror Movie Crew Podcast, Alex Seligson, Eric Doolittle, Sean Irwin, Brian Samick, and Michael Evans. Our camp counselor reoccurring are Hunter Nelson, Dennis Kennedy, Edwin Hernandez Gunn, Joe Swinford, Jennifer Davis from the Too Close to Home podcast, Heather Smith, Kylie Denise, all the way from Australia, Adrian Aiello, Jake Hambrick, Clay Moore, Karen, Matt Strickland, and Gail Kuntz. And our final girl donor we have is Missy Wall. We'll be doing her pick in a couple of weeks. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Dustin, go ahead and announce your pick for next week.
Yeah, there was. If you want to know the truth, what sparked this? I told you guys that what's caused me to pick some of my picks lately I've been watching a movie and I'm like, that makes me think of something. So I was watching the new MonsterVerse movies, like Kong, Skull Island, Godzilla versus Kong, and I was like, damn, you know what? It's time that we do the original King Kong. And I'm not talking about the 2005 version. I'm not talking about the 1976 version either. 1933's King Kong. I've seen this movie a ton. Used to watch it with my papa a lot growing up, like I said. So, yeah, looking forward to getting it. I will say it's the longest of the movies we've done this month. I apologize for nothing.
All right, guys. Any final thoughts before we just get out of here?
Nope.
Just want to thank all our fans and listeners. Really appreciate y'all. Hope y'all have been enjoying these classic movies. Tune in next week and check out our interview with Guy Busick. It was a great interview. Really appreciate him coming back on. He's easily become one of my favorites to talk to on this show. Y'all have a good one.
A 1, a 2, a 3.
Just want to remind everybody.